In the previous video, we've gone through the basics of database list page setups. In this video, we'll be going into a bit more depth. The example we'll be using here is the creation of a page for sponsors of the conference site that we've been building. We also have a setup here which allows for certain sponsors to be head sponsors, and we could even adjust the specific order in which these head sponsors will appear. We'll use Tangora's Focus Features capabilities to achieve this. We'll also utilize the so-called multi-image field to create a little image presentation for our head sponsors. Finally, as a little bonus, we'll create a database list page as a teaser, adding it as a page block in our page layout. Our sponsor database has been created, and we can take a brief look at the data here centrally. But then let's take a look at an example of the final result so we can see what we're going after. As you can see here, we have a differentiation between the way that the two top sponsors are displayed versus the rest of the sponsors. So let's get right to work. I have a page called Sponsors, which I'll change to a database list page. And then I'll select the Sponsors database. And then I'll start out by creating our overview layout. This is a layout for our general sponsors, as opposed to the featured sponsors at the top, by the way. So what I'll do is that I'll add a single column and give this column a wide padding so the contents have a bit of space around them. And then I'll add the field logo small and link address, and I'll give the latter a bit of extra space on the left edge. I want my sponsors to be presented in two columns, so I'll do two things. First, I'll convert to Visual Designer 2.0 and make my width 100%. Then I'll go into the Tangora button to Block List Settings and choose to distribute my blocks into columns. Note that there are various adjustments here that can be made, but I should actually be good to go just with the defaults. A little detail is that I don't want to have a counter text here, so I'll go to the Filtering tab and just delete that string. So far, so good. We've created a layout for our regular sponsors and ensured that they'll be displayed in two columns. But now I want to create a differentiated layout for my top sponsors. We'll do this using Tangora's Focus Features capability. Well, here's the skinny on Focus Features then. I'll go to my Overview tab and notice that we have at the top a Focus Item Selector. Here I could choose between one or two levels. In the current case, we just have one variation on sponsorship, so I'll select one. Then I have some further choices. First, we have a filter. In the database, we've prepared a filter which ensures that only those items which have top sponsor checked are active. And this is a mechanism where I distinguish my top sponsors from the rest. Then I have to choose the number of focus items. That is to say, in the current example, how many top sponsors is there space for? Let's say we have a limit of 3. The next option is if I should repeat my focus items. In certain cases, it will make sense to do so, but not right here. So I'll check to indicate that yes, I only want them in my focus layout. Then all that remains is creating the layout. Now, I've shown the process of making a Visual Designer layout a few times here, so here comes a time wipe. Right, so now for our top sponsors, I actually want to allow the user to click into a view where they could see some additional details about that sponsor, including a little slideshow of the products from that sponsor. Now, you could create and activate a detail layout for any database page. In this case, we'll only be activated by placing a Read More button for our top sponsors as an editorial choice. Right, so now we have to create and activate a detail view. Activation is done just by clicking on the appropriate field here. In this case, we have a specific field for that purpose that has been created in our database. Then, over in the Detail view, I could create a layout. Before I do so, a little detail here is that I can come to control the text that will appear on the Back button that I can optionally place to allow the visitor to come back to the overview. Okay, then I'll just get to the business of creating my layout. Now I want to show you how to configure a multi-image field with an image rotator. You'll be able to use built-in image rotators or image rotators that you've created yourself in various contexts. And this example shows you just one example implementation which will familiarize you with the concept. And now, when I come to adding an image here, I will choose a field called Image Collection, which is a multi-image field, which we'll look at in the central database a bit later. And what we can see here is that there's a bunch of images. And it's here that I want to create my image rotator. I could do this by selecting the multi-image field and then hitting the multi-image button. Now in the interface, I could choose how I want to display my field. I'll have to enter here a width and a height. And while I could scale my images as I'd like, I could also take the time and go into my image archive, find the images that are being used, and then find the relevant height and width, which is 214 by 129. Then I'll say for View Mode, Image Rotator, and then choose an image rotator. Here we have some system-defined image rotators, but I could also configure my own under Design and Layout, Snippets, Image Rotator. And then here we can see the result. Our system for displaying sponsors is now in place. So now let's say we have an existing sponsor that upgrades their sponsorship. Here, we'll see how a quick change to our data will automatically lead to a change in the data's display based on the setup that we've just created. Let's say that Gary's Organic Goodies needs to be upgraded. To add new sponsors or make adjustments to existing sponsors, I'll navigate to Database Lists and to the Sponsors list. And then I'll select Top Sponsor here, and then I'll give them a placement order. Say we've already sold Adam's Apples the number 2 slot, then we could add a number 1 in this case. Finally, I'll add some images, which now become relevant. So down to the bottom, I'll choose Add, and then via Smart View searching, find some images that apply to Gary's Goodies. And now I'll save. Notice in my Overview tab that I can control the order in which my items are displayed. So this could be alphabetic, in the order that the items are created in my database, or in this case by the special placement order field that I've created myself. And now we filled out our top sponsor position. The last thing that I'd like to show you now is how you can create a database list page that can be used as a page block, which is to say a page which can be embedded in another context. In this case, I want to add a little sponsor teaser at the bottom of the content of the page, and I want the sponsor to be randomly chosen. Okay, here's an illustration of the effect that I want to achieve. To implement this effect, I'll go to my page tree and create a new database list page, which I'll call Sponsor Page Block. I'll also deselect the default page layout, as I don't need a headline or anything here. And then I'll select Sponsors as the relevant database list. Under Content then, I'll select Show Random. And then I'll also be careful to set the cache duration to none, because I want a random effect. And then I'll make a layout, bing bang boom. Here I'll just use the wrap float left option to get my elements on the same line, and then adjust the margin for each element in turn. Finally, I want to ensure that only one item is shown at a time. Under the Filter tab then, I'll set the max number per page to 1, and I'll just get rid of my counter text default down here. Okay, so then let's add it to our page layout. I could easily navigate to the default page layout, taking Properties, and then clicking Edit next to the page layout line. Here we can add a page block alongside the existing section blocks. I'll call it Sponsor Teaser. And then we'll choose the page from the page tree here. I'll also remove a cache here, which I'll only take time to do because I'm utilizing a random functionality. What remains is positioning the page block in our layout. I'll see that our new page block is right up here in the overview of merge fields, and then I can just click on it and it will automatically appear at the bottom. I just want to add a bit of margin and padding and a border. Note that I could achieve the same effect in the module layout, but here I'm demonstrating that you can combine formatting, and I think it's a bit easier to add margin and padding and a border in this context. And then I'll just save, and then we can see the results as we're browsing through our pages. A final note here is that you may do well to disable this random showing of sponsors on the sponsor page. And this can be done by creating an alternative version of your page layout via Save As in order to create an exception for just this page. Your organization's data is undoubtedly a valued asset. And the value of using Tangora's database module is that you take full control over your data. Additions, deletions, modification, and presentation of your data in various constellations, even potentially synchronized with your organization's other IT systems. Tangora's database module is capable of handling large amounts of data optimally, all in an astonishingly straightforward, easy-to-use interface. So we've just gone through a couple of examples in these two videos on the topic of database page creation, but we're only really scratching the surface here. The real fun begins with creating and modifying your data structure and using the database list module with other modules, including notably Application Constructor. So the module gives you control over some really quite complex operations that normally have to actually be controlled by programmers. You're already well underway, and so you just need to learn a bit more about the interface and some perspective on how best to structure your data, and then you too will be working at a very high level. Thank you for watching.